Your death coach awaits. What's happening? Death Coach 42 here. Your death coach awaits. I saw a comment declaring the voice that you're hearing to be, he's the real life coach, right? All of existence defined in relation to a particular individual, apparently. The world of cult, anti-cult, right? So that's the solution to the culted ones. Culted ones is anti-cult. Right? Cult, anti-cult. Fake life coach. Oh, well, Benton, whatever that is, that's the real life coach. That's what I saw in the in a live chat somewhere in the deep in the recesses of waking dreams, surrealistic unreality. Maybe that was the voice to skull, though. Who knows? Can't be bothered to tell the difference. And as we know, these streams are for entertainment purposes only. It's getting weird. That's one strange hill of beans. Boy, I tell you. Uh-oh. It's a slow start around these parts. Y'all don't need me to tell you, but I'll tell you anyway. Funny how that works. Uh-oh. Oh, yeah, good. How's me audio? How's me audio? Can I get an audio check? Partner. We're here. We're queer. We're cavalier. Yeah, it's been an interesting morning so far. Many revelations received during the good old morning constitutional. Heavy detox symptoms, though. Heavy detox systems. The body asking for water, please. All right, here you go. I mean, why should the liver, pardon me, and the kidneys get all of the attention? You know, imagine pontificating for hours a day and not even bothering to master the operation of one's own large intestine. I mean, seriously. Is this what we're on about? Who is? Oh, I'm sorry, the royal we. Me, myself, and I, De La Soul style, perhaps. DBC, do better content. Yes, sir. All right, what are we doing? Egg drink. Hey, I got a one of them wireless Bluetooth microphones. Now can the being master speaking conversationally and not yelling at everybody. Because I did the microphone test, and there's no StreamYard, to operate the microphone volume. When I yelled into the microphone, as is my custom, it was quite loud on the YouTube. So, how's the old audio, folks? Oh, thank you, Joe Moore. Peace and respect, Benton and chat. Thank you. Well, respect is earned, but I don't want to lecture on that. The royal we would rather not. But it's just going to be a weird one, at least to start. So thank you for your patience. And being that I'm broadcasting at, I don't know what time it is, 4:20 a.m. The being broadcasting from a Nissan Versa hatchback while preparing what passes for breakfast. There's a flashlight. And no, we don't do headlamps. I already hear the loop into problem solving. What about a headlamp? Yeah, you think old Benton had never considered a headlamp? But apologies, I feel the irritation and annoyance bubbling up, and you folks have done nothing to earn that. That was a figment of my own imagination. Where so how about a little decorum there, Benton? Me talking to me. And maybe you talking to you. All right. But yeah, the concept of a life coach. That's what the revelations have been about this morning. Quite the creative inspiration, I think, would be the best way to put it. We got a flashlight in our mouth in order to see in the pitch black. And that's okay. What's the difference? And whoa. Oh no, we broke a fucking joke, man. What a disaster. Whatever shall we do? Cry over a spilled egg yolk, apparently. Shame on the mess. And the audience needing to be told what to do. And this is the function of a cult, not occult, right? This is, one of the proper functions of a cult is to, whether directly or indirectly, in this case, thank you for liking the stream. See how that works? And this is one of the many myriad realities of so-called humanity. The breaking of eggs to then break an egg yolk, but 85% of everybody is dependent upon something outside of themselves to tell them what to do, and that's how it is, and that's never going to change. So part of the proper care, feeding, and operation of the being's large intestine is what? Acceptance. And to release oneself from the chains of attachment to notions that, well, people could, right? They could. Whoa, wait a minute. This is a disaster already. This one's going to break too. I can already see it. Nope, we got lucky. There's a certain skill involved in breaking eggs, of course. The reality is, yes, perhaps individuals could grow and change and evolve within themselves in order to not need to be told what to do. But that's simply not going to happen in the vast majority of cases. Oh, it fell through anyway. It didn't break, and then while I was trying to talk, it fell through anyway. Wow, this is crazy. I don't know that I've ever made the egg drink with only 4 eggs. Egg yolks. Huh. Well, we're going with it. We're going with it. It's been one of them mornings. Yeah, it's pitiful looking down in there at only 4 egg yolks. You kidding me? Now we have egg whites on the pants, the newly laundered pants. Goodness gracious. Whatever shall we do? Wipe it off and move on. And so, back to the concept of a life coach. And then trying to avoid mentioning certain truth channels, so-called, but what's it even matter? What's a particularly egregious amount of egg white on the pants? What happens is I managed to find rolls of toilet tissue in the bathrooms, and generally I have some of them on hand for the wiping, right? And if anybody's ever watched Kitchen Nightmares, Gordon Ramsay, work clean, you got to clean up as I go along. And I have no kitchen, of course. Having no kitchen, there is a great potential for messiness here. And I think it's a reminder of just how easy, in certain ways, life as an American is. And not that that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's what is, right? But, imagining wandering around later with noticeable egg white on my pants, which is really not a big deal because, a few days from now, the pants will already be dirty enough that's like, what's the difference? But at this point, oh, wait a minute. The being would prefer the clean pants, but again, what is the difference? Who cares? And why do I care? And then back to the proper operation and healing of one's own large intestine to release these notions around, well, my pants must be clean, right? Or wait a minute, a little too much dirt under the fingernails, right? And this is the process of death coaching, because Benton would already be earning his living as a life coach if that was a thing, most likely. But that's not a thing. That's a flim flam. That's a con artist, right? And a con artist, Benton is not. And if certain people in the so-called truth community are, well, that's their problem, right? And then something about, the tree by the fruit. Anyway, none of my business. But yeah, being referred to in a live chat as, Benton, he's the real life coach. Well, okay, Benton defined in relation to a fake life coach. How does that work? How does that work exactly? Is this yet another demonic attack? And then waking up this morning, into waking up into waking dream, surrealistic unreality, and Christian and biblical notions of being persecuted or facilitating the resurrection of the risen Christ within. And I'm like, where's my persecution? You know, wait a minute, where's my persecution? I thought these were the best demons money could buy. Are they taking the day off? I don't know. Maybe it's maybe they're having a seminar. Maybe they're having a convention somewhere to discuss new tactics, perhaps. I don't know. Don't care. Yeah, it's been a peaceful, calm morning. Thank you all for your patience and your liking of the stream. Above the trees. Yes. Can't you see that I'm floating away into creative and revelatory spaces here, sir? You're trying to tether me. You're trying to tether me back to the dystopia there, sir. But yeah, feel free to fill me in with the. I'm out of the loop with any recent Thorpe lore. So I know there was a Grace v. Destiny a while back, but not really sure what happened with all of that. But yeah, anyway, if you want to tell us all about it, that'd be cool. Above the trees. I got weird stuff on my mind, and I know how much the audience loves weird stuff. So, but yeah, Death Coach. I figured it out. Death Coach 42. What? Do better. You know, form of dystopia. The only way out is through. Your death coach awaits. All he demands, as by way of payment, is a pound of flesh, the proverbial pound of flesh. So, yeah, there we go. No more care or concern about earning a living. Right. Glad I got that solved this morning. Good on me. And certain folks may not realize, or maybe they do, in a game of incomplete information such as poker, right? To take the form of definition, you know, defining Benton in relation to another person, right? Well, so first we have a fake life coach, and then, well, wait a minute, Benton is the real life coach. Well, if we need a fake life coach, and of course the royal we, you know, if we need a fake life coach to figure out who to anoint real life coach, well, that's a fairly strong indicator of the potential holdings of the being's poker hand, right? If we're talking Texas Hold'em, then you know the two cards that the person's holding. But yeah, Death Coach holding a 4 and a deuce apparently. I don't know. Is that what it is? Hard to say. Don't forget the hill of beans. Uh-oh. Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing above the law, who wants to know if I read the chat. Well, but see, here's the thing is, sometimes there is no chat. See, so the being seeks structure. So as your death coach, right? And if you try me for my death coach ones, I'll kill you. Believe that. If you try me for my death coach ones, I'll kill you. But whatever that means. Say, wait a minute, I thought we were already dead over here. Well, touche. So what does he mean by we? Not sure it matters at this point. So, seeking to enforce structure or request structure onto a creative process, right? And wanting to know the safety and security, right? Wanting to feel secure and what to reasonably expect. And which is fine, right? Which is fine. However, why? And this is, the how annoying, and choosing not to give into any potential annoyance here. Why are people the way they are? What's the reason for the question? Why is it important to know that? Or is it important to know that? Or maybe perhaps by what means may we potentially annoy the boomer who's broadcasting, right? BB, the broadcasting boomer. How to more effectively and efficiently annoy the boomer broadcaster? Well, it'd be helpful to know if he's going to live chat, because if he doesn't read the live chat, perhaps there's other bozo broadcasting boomers to potentially trigger and annoy, right? And especially if they've just woken up this morning, cranky old man is always a factor, or generally, not always, right? But the live chatter would certainly never be operating on any of those bases, right? Not possible. Meanwhile, I looked into the chat about 5 minutes ago and I addressed one of your chats. So would that not answer the question? See? And this is why this is why death coaching is the way forward and not life coaching, because life coaching is a scam. It's never not a scam, right? It's always a scam. And that's called life in dystopic America, which will never not be. It's always been dystopic America. And so imagine the folly in earning one's so-called living. No, earn one's death. This is not an earning of a living. See, that's a false premise. Now, it's not for Benton to explain all of this. Write a book. Shut the fuck up. Write a book. Just or wait around until you can until I can telepathically convey these ideas. Like, ideas are dead on that level. Now, they're not dead, but they're dead on that level. See. But then the con artistry of the life coach, much like a trainer, right? At a certain point, Benton had mastered, physical working out and all of these things to the extent of, well, maybe just go be a, earn one's living, right? Earn one's living from training people. But what sort of so-called life coach could even be a life coach without properly examining and understanding the concept of a life coach at all, right? Because the reason why earlier versions of Benton chose not to become a physical trainer, right? A workout, exercise, whatever it is, a trainer, personal trainer, there we go, is because it's a con. And what's effective in advancing a person who wants to do better with their physical health and their muscles and their body, especially body recomposition, is they got to kick the shit out of themselves, and they're hiring a trainer not from lack of information, because they don't know how to self-flagellate, right? And you get into that good pain. It hurts, but it feels good. Hurts so good. Well, that's what will prevent them from returning to give more money, is the soreness and how they feel in the short term. And with the delayed gratification, nobody's going to pay money to maybe be awesome in a year and a half. That doesn't make any sense. So the personal training would come down to, they basically watch me work out alongside them, more or less, right? I mean, realistically, and don't advance, and then half the time, especially if it's a lady, but some of the fellas too, then they're going to hit the air quotes juice bar of the gym on the way out, because now they deserve a treat, because remember, they've worked out, so now they get a reward. So the whole thing's pointless. Can we skip the endeavor and just zell me fucking $50 or whatever, right? Which is kind of what this is on a level, right? It's just not one-on-one necessarily, but calling it life coaching, right? And calling the human experience, referring to this as life is not even correct. That's not correct. Of course, in inverted world, it's inverted. This is a death. This is a death. What I am is the source of all life. There's no reason to come here except to live a death, and even live is not the right thing. To within the context of waking dream, surrealistic unreality, what would it be like if a indivisible being could have an individuated experience and work with the concept of death? Because what I am can't work with the concept of death. It can't experience, it can't imagine what death would be, or what that even is. See, so this is not life, this is death. So life coach doesn't make any sense. Death coach makes all the sense in the world. But I'm not your death coach, I'm my death coach. But in the example of the people who are not going to actually function as their own death coach, might as well hang out with me and pretend like there's knowledge being imparted. But there's not. There's no knowledge being imparted. Again, back to the entertainment and the hill of beans. And that's okay. Back to my rectum damn near killed him. Part of this is the healing of the large intestine. Again, imagine believing the being has all this wisdom and can't even operate their own large intestine properly. All right. Well, as my own death coach, certainly in the process of rectifying, hey, there we go, rectifying that situation. So yes, everything came out all right. Thank you for asking. And the thing about life coaching and explaining and pontificating and always smartest person that sounds the dumbest, and spirituality, yeah, that's fine and good, but again, Benton recognizing his own need for effectiveness in the real world, and Benton himself is served by the discourses above and beyond all, certainly. But from the perspective of the listener, that's on the listener. What are they getting from it? And some of it is, well, we need to be able to see, you know, some people want to see, well, can we trigger a boomer today? You know, and lacking the capacity to understand that the boomer in question has been on the internet every day for his entire adult life, and he's 50 years old. Let you do the math on that one. So off you go, perhaps to find a different boomer to trigger. I don't know. Doesn't matter. And you know, he'll read the chat or not read the chat, or go live and turn the chat off at times. Sometimes yell at the chat. Sometimes bully them into donating and remind them to like the stream. And that's called creative license. And that's called, you know, in the codependency or the tango or the give and take of, you know, something that needs a catalyst in order to operate, right? The being choosing to seek a catalyst to interact with and to play off of, well, that turns into a form of beggars can't be choosers. You don't really, I mean, you can kind of, but at 5 in the morning or whatever time it is, wherever you folks may be, you sort of have to take what you can get, right? Well, is this really all that's available? All right, I guess. I don't know. But see, that could never be. Old Benton here, he, you know, he sounds wise and at times is complimented, and you know, the government tested him in the 99th percentile and all of these things, but smartest person that sounds the dumbest. But there's no possibility that he's on the money with those comments. That, no, it's just, no, I'm the person, you know, the people are here innocently and you know, seeking to learn. Well, that can't possibly be true, because we have a control group, and that's called the so-called Truth Community Panelverse, if anybody knows what this is. And if you don't know, it's fine. But observing them 4 years ago and observing them today, being no change. They're the same. You know how hard it is to stay the same for 4 years? But again, totally fine if they're the same. But old Benton, your broadcaster, doesn't have that luxury. I don't know if that's the proper term. So that's certainly no option. We have a domestic dispute argument going on outside the car. I'm try to keep my voice down. And this gentleman perhaps has not learned the lesson that when a human is in a emotionally charged state, logic cannot penetrate. So that's how that goes. Mm-mm. All right, it's egg time. Oh, we got some gorilla pimping going on. Gorilla pimping. Anybody knows what that is. Of course, that's something that's not that well understood by the male with respect to the female, is that it's all about her feelings, and nothing will ever be as important to her, other than perhaps her children. Other than that, nothing will ever be as important to her as her feelings. And some of that is, in a increasingly insecure seeming world, if she's going to have a fella around, he's going to have to be able to show her that he can protect her, right? So sometimes it's sort of the woman, goading and manipulating and manufacturing some sort of a disagreement, so that finally the male who's been, neutered, and, he has no balls, society doesn't allow him to have balls and all of this. Well, finally, it's 5 a.m. and nobody's around, and he asserts himself. And sometimes this takes the form of violence, right? Or at least threats of violence. And I know you probably can't hear that with the noise canceling of the microphones, but that's some version of that going on out there. Again, your death coach awaits. Don't forget to tip your death coach. Where did the flashlight go? Never a dull moment here in the Nissan Versa. But yes, in the argument was a reminder of, hey man, you're working on keeping your voice down a little bit, because even when I keep my voice down, it still can be heard, right? And then, back to this concept of masculinity, and watching all these interrogations and people in court. I like that Judge Boyd, that black lady. Probably just, yeah, she's a brilliant judge. And half of these guys, man, they can't speak coherently and with at least just normal conversational volume. They're mumblers, blah, 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 blah. You can't even really hear what they're saying. They won't speak up. With this idea of make America great again, and that's all dead. So your death coach is here to remind folks that this concept of what's right and proper in society, and the idea of people getting jobs, and making the world a better place, so it's all dead. It's dead. So the problem solving at the level of, well, what in the world is wrong with society, and how do we, right, heavy air quotes on the we, how does society fix all of these things? But that's from the perspective of the commoners, who most of the time have their heads in the sand, but then occasionally they're forced out of their self-imposed delusional reveries, right? And in their so-called distractions, which is really not even distractions, but whatever amusements they choose, whether it's TikTok or video games, or in my case, listening to YouTube. But it's a little bit different in Death Coach 42's case, where I realized some of these people in the so-called truth community have like so many multiple names. I'm way behind, so I'm gonna have to catch up. Well, I don't have to. Perhaps I could. Right. And see, that's the reframing, and that's the coaching. The coaching is to observe in the moment and then to correct on the fly. Like computer systems have this error correction with the memory, especially. It's built in. Built-in error correction. But it's this notion of never-ending discussions of whatever the news of the day is, But meanwhile, go watch some court proceedings. You know, on YouTube, people remix this content, and the people, even the ones that can somewhat speak into the microphone at court and be heard, a lot of them are on drugs to the point where they aren't even comprehending what's happening. And I've seen numerous times when the judge, you can tell, is on the verge of, it's like, do I have to do a competency? Like, is this person, it's basically like, do you even know what's going on? They're saying to the person, like, are you aware of what's happening here? And then meanwhile, the psychology of the individual who's in court is, they're above reproach. You know, in their mind, everything's perfect. They don't lack any, you know, they lack nothing that would, so simultaneously they're sort of trying to throw themselves on the mercy of the court and say, well, you know, if you'll just give me another chance, you know, I'm going to get a job and support my family and, you know, go through rehab for the bazillionth time. And then, you know, the judge is just looking at them like, well, I don't even know if you know what this is. Like, how, but you know, to know this whole script around just sort of to play the game of the system. But then what does the listener immediately think of around here? What's the first? So here's the panic. I'm going to give you a tip as not your death coach, but if you want to create your own little death coach inside that might grow quite powerful and to be able to coach you through this death, because it's, to refer to this as life, that's not correct. This is not life. This performance that seemingly seems to be a collaboration, and it seems to be based on love, tolerance, acceptance, mutual respect. That's not possible here. And who's willing? And again, back to the con artistry of the life coach. Well, how is it possible to earn a, can't call it a living because that's not a, and can't really call it a death because nobody would know what I meant. So how is it possible to have access to Federal Reserve notes when making one's vocation into giving people tips, hints, and tricks for the video game? And you know, I don't believe, I'm not saying that in the strict sense, but you know, whatever this place is, and it's been described ad nauseum, not at nauseum, ad nauseum. Although it is nauseating as well, but it's been described. So we'll skip past that. The royal we. See, this is an impossibility, and how much of society is structured to waste or to have the individual just performing in a business sense and serving various systems that are intentionally maintained at a level of collapse, right? But, and also there's really no possibility of facing them as they are. There must be this performative, you know, go along to get along. So yeah, in order to be a life coach, that's not even a thing, and that's a con artist, and that would be Benton finding people who suffer from such heavy delusion, and I would know that they're suffering from heavy delusion, and then I would be humoring them just long enough to get $100 out of them or whatever, and that's a violation. See, and old Benton here, how's he going to properly operate his rectum damn near killed him, but then be out here committing violations? You see what I'm saying? To cling to these notions of life, again, not life, of whatever's happening daily is not real. It's dead. So the problem solving is dead. The idea of, well, Benton, you know, go drive a truck, you've got a CDL, or well, Benton, these are your resources, this, that, and third. And, you know, um, if this political leader does that over here, and this part of the government lowers interest rates over there, and, you know, if the tariffs have an effect, it's all dead, man. It's all dead. And none of it's going to amount to a hill of beans. So the proper operation of the large intestine, again, why should the liver, the gallbladder, and the kidneys get all of the attention at the level of healing? It's like, oh, you think you're going to heal that large intestine with those emotions, sir? Imagine a human, whatever that is, but within the context of this nightmare dystopia, who would expect their just the operation of a physical body on a day in, day out basis. Life, again, so-called, what is expected of individuals on a daily basis is simply incompatible with even operating one's body properly. And so what I see in Los Angeles is people are less dysfunctional, although I'm certainly not implying that they're doing things correctly. The people are less dysfunctional at the level of earning money, coping with, although, let's not kid ourselves, a lot of the coping is actually through pharmacology, but, at least acknowledging that there must be a work-life balance, and they must, walk through the park and exercise and eat certain foods and make sure to get plenty of sleep, again, in order to facilitate the operation of the physical body, right? Versus middle America, who's just YOLOing and being like, yo, man, just we're shoveling the goy slop down the gullet, and just whatever happens, happens, while also being on the chemicals. See, and that's the state of this country. And so the notion of, well, the government's going to do this and the corporations are going to do that, and it's all dead, right? At the end of the day, right? What's Benton feeling? Does his physical body operate, right? Does it work? Meaning, when he eats the food, can he reasonably expect to poop at some point? And people may laugh or ooh, that's gross, or why are you talking about that? Because I'm almost certain that most people, and this has been me at times, most people, that's simply not the case. This is not a thing that happens in their life. They eat food, and it's not even food. And then the body does not process it. It doesn't come out the other end the way that so-called God intended. It just simply doesn't happen. So, how many hours of every day does Benton spend as his own death coach, just involving himself with what must be done so that at some point a proper turd can be deposited into a toilet bowl? Again, this is considered like the most basic level of humanity. And when I see society, this is not happening, right? And Benton, blessed enough this morning within the context of this cursed realm, right? This accursed realm of death and destruction and decadence and depravity, actually experiencing detox symptoms is like feeling ill, right? And that is the healing. That's so what's not also not understood. Again, to be one's own death coach. But what does the human do? The human seeks to the comfort of their peer groups. The human seeks friends to talk to, and maybe nobody, because it's a taboo, nobody really wants to mention, but then eventually, somehow, some way, again, Benton is catalyst. A Benton might come along and just say something about pooping, right? And then now maybe one of the two bashful friends will be willing to broach the topic of, well, have you been pooping? And now they have something in common. No, we're not pooping properly, right? The two friends are not pooping properly. And that's what the human wants. The human wants some version of a peer group, right? And sort of they want to be able to know that, yeah, we're not pooping properly, and that's okay. See, and the human, again, this is the death coach function, is for Benton to just say, hey, dummy, yeah, it's normal in 2025. And furthermore, are you interested in pooping properly, or do you want to keep pooping poorly and then have somebody to bond with over the poor poop? Hmm. Which is valid, it's fine, but you know, the human will put that need to relate to and be supported and listened to uh, above everything else. See, and that's one of the many reasons why it's not possible to have a proper society, and why when in 1948 or 1950 people romanticize that period and say, well, that was proper society. Well, no, it wasn't. That was what the brainwashing of the day dictated, because that's what served the system, because the system at that time was building up the infrastructure of the country, especially in relation to other countries. Pardon me. How rude. And now we have Gen Z and younger millennials want to blame everything on the boomers, but they see Gen Z can't relate to what life would have been like in the 50s and the 60s. And people think, hippy dippy, peace and love. And all. No, that was the 70s, actually. It was like the tail end of the 60s. So you had at least 15 years in the post-war period, I would say. And then again, the middle part of the country in a time warp, clung to 1955 far longer than the rest of the country in certain ways. But they got locked into this notion of that's the way to be. It's like, no, that was the way to be at the time. And the only way to have friends and a peer group and be accepted in the bullshit society of the day, the decadent, depraved, degenerated society, because America in 1955 was decadent, depraved, degenerate, and fallen, right, and maintained the state of collapse even as it was built up. And so Benton can't do anything about extracting, separating people from their funds, because it would be akin to personal training, and uh, to actually require the person who's being trained to progress over time. That person will associate all pain, struggle, you know, all of the negatives, all of the things that are uncomfortable about working out the body and dealing with the body to look a certain type of way and to feel a certain type of way and to have a certain fitness level. That all gets transferred onto the personal trainer. So now, because it's been connected to business transactions here in the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, his paycheck now depends upon when that person leaves the session, they got to be on cloud nine, and they can't progress towards their goals if they insist upon leaving each session on cloud nine. Because remember, at some point they're going to be on their social media, posting selfies before the workout, during the workout, after the workout, and then in the comments, it's going to need to be a specific graven image to uphold before Moloch's machine. And that's why this is a death and not a life, because the person probably actually wants to have a fitness level. They probably actually want to look a specific type of way. They probably actually want to lift a certain type of weights. Mm. And then someone would say, well, what about these um, CrossFit chicks with the muscles and all this? Well, what about them? There's always individuals in society that are attracted to doing things that are difficult. They say, oh, why not train one of them? Because they train themselves. That's why. Or they just go to the CrossFit gym and it becomes competitive. Now they're the new person, and they're either going to quit or they're going to stick around by busting their ass. See, there's nothing to be done. I realize now I skipped a step in the egg process. It's a bummer. Pardon me. There's all these little bits of where the yolk connects to the white, and I usually remove them first, and I failed to do so. So now I'm having to spit them out. So that's your life coaching. But so that's why Benton is now your death coach. And I say your, but it's, you know, not, it's not that, but for the purposes of this live stream and maybe future live stream, your friendly neighborhood death coach. To you know, but it's up to the person being coached. They have to run their own program, because that's the way it works here. It's a wholly individual experience spiritually. You know, to come here and to listen to this, it's really representative of nothing whatsoever. So the death coaching is actually me, myself, and I, whatever that is. And, you know, for my own purposes, feeling compelled, and you know, it is something of a gift and a talent in certain ways. Again, it's not going to amount to a hill of beans, but right, the creative side of it artistically is, if Benton wants to do the thing in the context of a death coach 1 or a death coach 42, and they say, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, Kurt Cobain at a certain point was asked what his song lyrics meant, and he was like, basically, I don't know what it means. Why don't you tell me what it means? I mean, I don't fucking know. I'm the artist. Why do you think I know what it means? All I know is it means something of significance, and it came via inspiration or revelation. And that's good enough. That's good enough. Because otherwise, it's what? Back to this notion of crafting a graven image to uphold before Moloch in the context of the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. Which is dead, but it's called life. And a big part of what happens every day, especially in America, is to take that which is dead and to plausibly pass it off as life when it's no such thing. Right. And then how does the individual cope with this? Almost all humans will seek to cope through interactions with other people. So now we see, what is the reason for a so-called truth community panel verse? And then I'm looking at a certain channel and reading the live chat, and it's like, yeah, this is a fucking support group. It's a support group, but if people actually make progress, they just at a certain point leave it, which is fine. Or, you know, other individuals for their own purposes leave it. But the ones who choose to remain, do they even know that they're maintaining themselves in a state of collapse? Right? Do they know that? And so if they can't understand that their own community so-called activities are the result of that, the output of that is to maintain the community in a state of collapse. And then I tune in, and it's never-ending talk of, you know, rising up, coming together, you know, but it's all very vague, right? And it gets tied to certain channels and certain personalities, cults of personality. And then, you know, this notion that humans could follow behind a leader, right? Well, where's the precedent for humans choosing to coalesce around a leader or leaders, right? And to then have a clearly defined objective and to work together and achieve it. And I'm here to tell you, in the so-called truth community, that would be the first time. The first time, if it happened, it would be the first time. Um, and so do individuals even understand what they're doing? And I suspect a lot of them do. And, then what is the harm that happens when certain folks, you know, enter into these circles, but then sort of take it as it presents itself, and they believe the hype, right? They buy into this notion of, oh, look, you know, and it's a support group around how nightmarish society is. Well, society is in a state of collapse, and it's been in a state of collapse since you were born. And the fact that people choose to romanticize certain periods doesn't change the fact that those periods, society was still being maintained in a state of collapse, even as it was seemingly being built up. And clearly, whatever forces or influencers, whatever was influencing the building up and the nuclear family, right? And one person having a 40-hour a week job could pay for, the rest of the family. Yes, absolutely. And that was an accident, meaning the people did nothing whatsoever to create that for themselves. The people back then were just like the people today, lost in a Roman wilderness of pain, right? And not even alive in the sense of dead. The job is dead. The money's dead. Okay. The friendship is dead. The peer group is dead. The PTA is dead. And that's okay when the system needs society to be built up. So that level of collapse is maintained at a level of collapse where things seem to be good, but they're not. Okay. And that's provable because no proper society that actually embodied love, acceptance, tolerance, to actually tend to the welfare of the citizens, right? This has never happened, except as would directly serve the system. So, and then it's a temporary benefit. Meanwhile, the people in the 1950s that thought they had freedom and were going to actually live as independent beings would have been blasted with fear, guilt, and shame for doing the most basic things that a person does today. I mean, the most basic thing there is, right? Oh, I think I'll get a tattoo. Well, no, you won't. It's 1962. Are you out of your mind? You really want that level of fear, guilt, and shame? Because remember, what passes at all times for love, acceptance, and tolerance in society is to simply not be blasted with fear, guilt, and shame. And the moment the individual deviates from the herd, they're blasted with fear, guilt, and shame to get them back in line. See, this is the function of society, and this is how it's maintained at a state of collapse. So then to juxtapose that with the so-called truth community or just random normie channels that talk about, the dystopia and this idea that, basically men, there's really no place for men in society. This whole, what used to be the social contract around, being able to get married and raise one's kids, and, the whole white picket fence. And that, yeah, some people are still able to do that, sure, but everybody was able to do that. And if they weren't, something was wrong with them. In 1955, my hometown of about 50,000 people, 50 to 60,000 people, most of the town lived that way. Now, almost nobody lives that way. See, and it's not, well, just people were doing things properly in 1955 and they fell off. Absolutely not. The system needed them to work to build shit. So it gave them the bare minimum to be able to work and build shit. If they had been properly supported and given proper resources, there's no way that could have become this. It's not possible. So when you look at America and people are like, oh, it's not America anymore, and Rosie O'Donnell or whoever is like, yeah, it's not even America anymore. Oh, yes, it is. this is what it's always been, Rosie. And Rosie probably knows that on some level. And her reward in having money in the bank and being able to go live in another country, right? That's most likely because she's playing her position. And if you just physically look at a Rosie O'Donnell, that's what this system rewards. See, because she figured out and was probably born into a mechanism whereby it's just normal and expected in that environment to serve evil directly but not for free. See, so now you have the populace, you have the working class and the underclass who serves evil but doesn't demand anything in return. They're freely, other than just, oh, you mean we get to have our drugs and we get to have our amusements and our smartphone and our video games, or we get to have these things, right? And then, so it was a 40-hour work week, and now it's the 996. It's the Asian Chinese model of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. That's the minimum, right? Whereas the boomers and Gen X back in the day, it was 40 hours. And then maybe there was overtime. And if there was, that was usually you opted into it. And occasionally just as like, hey, man, we need you to work overtime. We're really sorry about this, but, if you wouldn't mind helping the team out. So boomers are looking at Gen Z going, they don't want to work, and they've forgotten that they themselves worked 40 hours and that was it, right? But they had the system in order to have the boomers and the generation before that build the country up after a war, was to blow a bunch of sunshine up their ass and tell them how great they are and how hardworking they are, and they've earned everything in life. And so their generational mind control, they're attempting to apply to Gen Z and millennials, and it's hurting society, which is already hurting. It's society damaging itself unnecessarily, because that's what society does. Because again, that's back to maintaining it at a state of collapse. And there's no solution. The only way out is through. And that's where the death coach comes in. The death coach is here to say, oh, you can't, none of this is fixable, but if you as an individual is coping with it, and the only way out is to move through it. And I can absolutely, Death Coach 42 or Death Coach 5000 or whatever, haven't settled on, and it may be a thing that should just sort of whatever I'm feeling like that day. And you may never hear it again. It may be, oh, he did a stream, Death Coach fucking 42, Death Coach. I think maybe he was talking about his shoes. He said, try me for your Death Coach, for his Death Coach ones, and he'll kill you. What? I don't know. I may never be brought up again. Who the fuck knows? But why do I care more about how you move through this than you do, the listener? And I am addressing the listener, and I will be specific with the pronouns. How come whatever Benton is, and again, we know Benton knows what he is. I'm saying this for the purposes of the discussion. How come whatever Benton is wants that for the listener more than the listener wants it for themselves? Because, and I'll answer the question. The death coach will say, your death coach, right, will say, well, you're in your own death coach. A coach is also that thing from the Wild West. And you're in the coach by yourself, and you're also driving the coach. And you're also the horses pulling the coach. You are all of that. It's completely individual, right? And this is the valley of the shadow of death, right? And are you just going to hang out on the edge of town with your coach and look at your screen, giggle at your feed, and talk to a bunch of bozos gathered up, who just want to loop into problem solving on the outskirts of the city somewhere, and then talk about building community and talk about, all of the things that the so-called truth community talks about, but to absolutely no effect other than to, in some ways, cope with the internal tensions of each individual, and to do that in a way in which personalities and various internal systems, interplay within each other. And then, oh, well, this one person, in particular, well, he's locked into his ways. And, if he would just get, and what's being implied is, well, if he would just get with the program, there's this great potential for growth and change. Yeah, that's you. See? And so, in order to avoid having to claim ownership of whatever an individual's possibility of growth and change within themselves, the internal bootstrapping is, well, now we have one or more individuals externally where there's no power, right, and no meaning to be found to interplay and interact with. But then to lie to oneself and to pretend like that could somehow enable a group to come together and move forward. That's not the case. Meanwhile, we have at least one person, and you're listening to him, who absolutely has demonstrated the ability to move through this and to grow and change and evolve and continue creative expression and to move through it. See? And so when I'm about to start a live stream and I say, ooh, there's an interesting hour-long Who Are These Podcasts? I'll probably listen to that later. I understand that that's a mere amusement, and I treat it as such. Now, do I still have a desire? Did I still consider, well, maybe I won't even try to talk to these people today. Maybe I'll just, suit myself and listen to this now. That's fine. What I'm not going to do is trick myself into thinking that there's anything possibly constructive that would ever come out of it. And so in these lolcow communities, what they call troll channels, where there's certain people like this Aaron Imholt from Steel Toe Morning Show, there's other people who make content and make channels about making fun of and mocking and ridiculing the lolcow, the Aaron Imholt. And the people who make channels, they get more viewership, right? More people watch because they respond to the drama of the interplay between the various personalities. And your death coach also responds to that. However, it's placed in the proper context. And it's also, if I want to post in a live chat, I post in a live chat. If I want to leave a comment, I leave a comment. But when I'm done with it, it's done. I don't carry it around with me. I'm not interacting with a personality, an imagined personality in my head later that day. See, what's happening with this so-called truth community, and I'm speaking from experience, is it's to perpetually have these people, in mind. And in fact, and I used to participate in all of this. I was, one of the people who did hour-long, many hour streams for every day for months on end. Right. So I was actually facilitating all of this. And if you look at a younger Benton, I was typically always a guiding force or a leader in whatever my peer groups were. See? And again, none of this is wrong. The part that's harmful is to attach notions of Jack Talcott, the life coach, as if that's, people are going to, that he's going to reform himself and do better. No, he's not. He's probably doing the best he can, sadly, and that's not to excuse his behavior. I'm just saying, and now you can get into the systems agent side of things, and that's fine. But on a recent stream, I proved that effectively everybody operates at the level of an agent on behalf of the system, whether they know it or not, and whether or not they're rewarded or punished. Is it formal or informal? Well, who cares? What's the difference? Yeah, there you go. Friendly neighborhood death coach. Well, and that's good to see you, Ray. That's the idea that Benton introduced to the community years ago now, which never took off, was the get in where you fit in on a grassroots ad hoc basis. And I mean the definitions of those terms, which is, a very loosely affiliated thing that could happen, right? But not without people working together. And that's what we've seen in the so-called truth community is people who actually perform their own undoing versus people who show that they're able to be effective. And now I've seen other people, it's not that everybody doesn't progress, but I progress. I've noticed that some people have improved, but they've improved within themselves and it shows. The improvement doesn't then translate onto the larger community, right? The larger community is still hanging out on the edge of town somewhere, idly, right? Uh, and that's okay. But it's only okay if the individuals understand. Now, here's where the death coach aspects come in. Yeah, let's line that up and reconcile it with Krishnamurti, who would say, yeah, that's completely fine as long as they know that that's what they're doing. So now it's Benton watching troll channels of lolcows. Yeah, I know that I'm watching a troll channel of a lolcow. Most of the so-called truth community is in confusion, thinking that somehow, some way, something's possibly ever going to grow out of this. And then every once in a while, somebody shows up and says, well, yeah, I've been driving without a driver's license or license plates for the last 3 months, as if that represents progress. Well, if that's their goal individually, I don't really understand or relate to it. But then it's in the context of sort of, and you guys can do this too. I'm like, well, I don't know if that's a proof of concept, you know. And what I'm able to get away with, or somebody else is able to get away with, is not the same thing. It's my old example of my friends who were able to get into a club in college with fake IDs. I knew somehow that it was just not ever going to be possible, but it wasn't me manifesting that. I just knew it's like, I'm different than these people. I knew there's 0% chance of me getting into there on a fake ID. Well, my friends wouldn't leave me alone. I was like, all right, I want y'all to watch this. And then off we go. And the bouncer takes one look at the ID and is like, this ain't you. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's not. And I just look at my friends like, hey, maybe old Benton knows something. I was 18 years old, maybe 19. And, that's the version of the person showing up and saying, hey, look, I'm driving without a driver's license and, no plates for 3 months now. It's like, yeah, but it's a female who's, a sex pod on some level. And you got these, the stereotypical law enforcement officer who, disempowered and women didn't pay no attention to him. And that person may be happy just to look down at some boobies for the time being and say, oh, okay, well, just make sure and get everything squared away. Right. And then the girl in this example knows to sort of bat her eyelashes and just sort of go along with it. Well, what's that? That's not proof of anything. Because some of these people are going to have their windows broken, their cuffs slapped on them, and they're off to jail within the first 5 minutes, as we've seen. So what I can do is not what you can do, and vice versa. But everybody coalesce around these ideas of living some type of way. Within what? A broken, non-functioning or dysfunctional society that's intentionally maintained at the state of collapse. What's the point? See? And until individuals are able to critically think their way through this is simply folly, which is fine. Feel free to engage in folly. But the problem is when the individual, number one, doesn't recognize the folly, and number two, actually thinks it's going to represent positive change in a Gandhian, be the change you want to see in the world. No, that's never going to happen. Ever. Because the only potential for that level of transformation and change is within the individual. It's the only possibility. It lives nowhere else. In fact, everything else is dead from the perspective of the individual. The only thing that's not dead is the transcendent power and potential within me to internally bootstrap and to bring up the level of my own conscious awareness, which then brings up my own level of being able to deal with my own emotions and to deal with the environment, the dead environment. See, but if the moment the dead environment convinces the individual to define their own life force and performance and identity in relation to the world of death and the games of lies, that's a trap. And the individual created the trap for themselves. And they did it because that is what was modeled to them. And that's how to click up with other people to have a support group. And it's sick and it's twisted. And this place has a sense of humor, and this place loves death. And that is death. It's death via community. See? And so, you know, this, whatever is going on this channel, it's grassroots, ad hoc, loosely affiliated, meaning there is no community. What are you talking about? There's no life coach. There's a death coach, but tomorrow he might just forget that he ever even called himself that, and it's on to the next thing. So there's no possibility of attachment or clinging to a thing that may or may not even be here tomorrow. Guess what? Tomorrow may not be here tomorrow from your perspective. This afternoon may not be here from your perspective. So is that not something akin to a performance within what people could choose to see life as? And I mean life meaning to perform in a way where it could actually be plausibly passed off as representative of life, even if it's not in the strict sense where two or more are gathered in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. Again, do you think I give a flying fuck what any of you do with the concept of the Lord Christ Jesus? That's me. Oh, he's calling himself God again. That's what you said. I'm talking about Benton's internal space. And it's, how is it ever possible that for you to reconcile, and this is really the big word here, reconciliation, if you know, that needs to be written down right now. Staff, write down the word reconciliation and underline it. Right? Staff, write down the word reconciliation in your notebook and underline it. Because everything I'm talking about here with the so-called truth community, the external peer groups, the copes, which is, hell, everything's a cope on some level. It's all tied up in an inability and a refusal or a not knowing to reconcile, right? And having a particular individual in the so-called truth community at times, not me, at times address reconciliation as a goal. Well, now everybody gets to trick their own, again, the Orwellian series of victories over one's own mind and memory. Now they feel like they've reconciled, right? And then most people will say reconcile in the context of what? Well, there was a panel and then there was disagreement, whether that was calm and placid or if people yelled at each other or a combination of the two. And then at some point, the drama ended, and then that seemingly functions, it feels like reconciliation. Oh, they reconciled. Well, then how come tomorrow it's the same exact thing over and over again? How come it's 4 years later and I click on a channel and I see a specific person yelling at the content creator on a live stream, on a panel, and I have a recording somewhere if I'm ever able to get back to my computer, or if it's, who knows if it's even available, I don't know. But you know, in a hypothetical world when I could get to my computer, I have a recording of that same person doing the same thing to a different content creator 4 years ago, and that different content creator was me. See, thus proof of concept around there is no reconciliation. But in this place, again, back to the fear, guilt, and the shame, it's the removal of the struggle and the strife and the passion play or drama of the interplay of the personalities and the emotions of the personalities, to then see that seemingly come to an end, at least momentarily. That's what people, it tricks people into believing falsely that there's been reconciliation. No, there hasn't been, and there never will be until you develop the ability to reconcile within yourself, with yourself. Again, death coach. Because this can't be called life if whatever is going on inside of Benton internally, where power and meaning are accessible, and no power and no meaning are accessible externally, then the reconciliation can only occur internally. Now, if there's a time when every single individual in a so-called community always knows to reconcile within themselves without being reminded and without being cajoled and without being given homework or rules. Well, over here, if a person refuses to reconcile, it's this punishment. Well, over there, they just let you not reconcile and it's just okay. Right. That's rules. That's artifice. That's structure. Well, the structure must be installed within the individual. And the way this works is the external can't install the structure within you because Moloch already claimed that space. Hate to break it to you. And Moloch ain't been evicted. Moloch's machinery is still inside of the individual. Not your death coach. That's why the person you're listening to is qualified as a death coach, because he's uninstalled the vast majority of that artifice. Now, do the ruins of Moloch's temple, the temple of antithesis, yeah, there's a ruins there, and every once in a while, you know, Benton behaves on behalf of, maybe he began to falsely identify with, maybe the part of the ruins where, hey, there's enough of a roof here, and the storms are brewing, the emotional storms are brewing, so maybe I'll, temporarily fucking huddle up in the corner underneath what's left of this little bit of roof, and you got a corner, right? You got all the walls have fallen, but you got like half of a wall and like a corner, right? And maybe a little bit of a roof, and then he'll temporarily falsely identify with as if that was somehow representative of safety and security, right? Death coach. So Benton has performed these things, but where? See, and until there's specificities, it's all talk. And we know that talk is cheap. And we see observably that nothing at a group level is ever going to come out of it, because it can't, because the individuals have already seen an artifice and a structure installed within themselves. And until that's cleared away, and only the individual can clear it away, then it remains and it serves this world of death and these games of lies. And the individual says, well, I have to make a living. And that's somewhere the realm giggles and covers its mouth and says it doesn't even know. Can you believe that this symbolic representation of perhaps the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit, supreme authority, the source of all actual life? Can you believe that it's referring to this dead world as life? And he's talking about earning a living, and it's blasting its fellow men and women with fear, guilt, and shame because of not, quote, sufficiently earning a living. Meanwhile, what's referred to as earning a living is to earn a death. And is death earned? Must a death be earned in this place? Is that why Benton is still here? He hasn't earned his death yet. And what about the warrior concept of a good death, or even the idea of needing to earn one's death? And anthropological notions of at a certain point, Japan, and people have forgotten this because look at what Japan is now. Japan's a joke at the level of, if you look at your average typical male from Japan, well, guess what? American males are now turning into the same version, a different cultural version of a Japanese man or male. I can't call them men. Right. Because at one time, the Japanese men were so fearsome, they had a war with the Russians and kicked the fuck out of the Russians. Beat the fuck out of them. And warlike Americans, they love a good war, don't they? You felt it right there. It just burbled up in old Benton, because there's a war going on inside of each one of us, whether we acknowledge it or not. And so, again, reconciliation, resolution, energies. And so, is it a surprise that the person I see being picked at in the so-called truth community, perhaps the most, is the person who wants to talk about chakras, right? And the person who's on here declaring himself spiritual warrior genius of late has been working with chakras for 15 plus years inside of himself effectively, and has almost nothing to say about chakras unless somebody asks. And guess what? They don't ask because they're scared of chakras, because Moloch's machine has installed its own artifice inside of them. And part of that artifice is, hey man, chakras ain't real and you better be scared of them, because that might lead. And in fact, I even heard that some people are trying to go to witches and warlocks and have their chakras removed. Well, maybe they are, but maybe they're doing that for a different purpose. But then again, old Benton here got to grow up in a mind control cult called the Jehovah's Witnesses. And even the local culture, because I would have been interested in meditation, right? And if I had actually mentioned meditation, the first thing I would have been told, whether in the Kingdom Hall or not, would have been, oh, no, you clear your mind and them demons enter in. It's like, what are you talking about? One of the most beneficial things I've ever done is meditation. And also, how would they know? If they're not allowed to experience it, how would they know what is going to happen? I haven't, in Arkansas, I never met anybody who practiced meditation and told me about it. So how would anybody know what would occur? It's fear, right? That's just straight up fear and lies. And meanwhile, my mother, had a recent conversation with my mother, and she told me that she brought up somebody that I didn't remember, some dude that I guess maybe my grandmother knew. And forgot, I don't remember the guy, but he gave me some like several pound like onyx ball or something. I mean, this thing weighed like 10 pounds. It was large because I was a toddler. So, it was a big object. And my mom said that, yeah, you would hold it and just stare at it. Right. And I immediately said, yeah, I was meditating. And she said, you were like 2 years old or whatever. I've been meditating from day one on some level. And then what was basketball? It was meditation. That was again, best branding since The Situation from Jersey Shore. That was to enter into a flow state, which is meditation, right? Unless it crosses over into trance. So how much of this so-called truth community and the idea of, well, this person is culted and that person is culted, how much of that is actually the individuals in a trance-like state or seeking to enter into a trance-like state, or no, an actual trance state, in order to have the fearless leader, so-called, the representation of security and safety, to have them, Jesus take the wheel, right? Which means the individual desirous of escape and detachment mistakes a trance for meditation. And in fact, I was so in love with meditation at a certain point that one of my close friends at the time, he decided he was going to meditate, and then he described what happened. And I said, man, I hate to break it to you, but you went into a trance, and that's not meditation. It's like kind of the inverse of meditation, actually. Again, it's fine to go into a trance if the being knows that they're in a trance, right? On some level, it's probably okay to be a mind control victim if the person knows they're a mind control victim. The harm is when the person is in a trance and doesn't understand they're in a trance. The problem is when they are a mind control victim and don't understand that they're under mind control. In fact, we'll just argue and fight and say, what are you talking about? Or in the example of Christianity, a person who will think that they believe in a book and that Jesus cast out demons, among other things, but they themselves could never possibly be infested with demons. See, same fucking thing. It works on, it works in several different contexts, right? Again, your death coach. So when I come on here and talk about Christ and all of this, that's fine and good, but it's also, in reminding myself when walking back to the car, it's like, okay, time to say your prayer. Don't forget to say your prayers. And in that moment, in this revelatory state that I was in, this magical, in some way, revelatory state, it's like, well, hey man, You know, you're on, and this is being my own death coach. It's like, well, buddy, you're on the precipice of turning this into a dogma while continuing to lecture people on dogma. So and that's akin to the so-called truth community who wants to lecture on, you know, doing all of these things that, but it's falling victim to the same things it's, you know, claiming to also provide the solution for. And so, yes, it's not inappropriate to pray in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. In fact, there's a lot of power there, and I did quite a bit of it yesterday for error correction, right? Pray without ceasing in some way. And I only pray because it works. If it didn't work, I wouldn't do it. But then to recognize this morning, it's like, well, am I going to turn this into superstition? Because how I'm feeling right now in this revelatory state, I was feeling like some version of Jesus, at least on a level, right? Meanwhile, you know, what I am is what Jesus was energetically. Same thing. At my core essence, Jesus was the version with no obstacles. He was the Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk version with full access to the risen Christ within him at all times. Benton is the version where there's mostly been blockages historically, and as more of these energetic blockages, again, the artifice of Moloch's machine, this realm, as more of that has been removed and healed and cleared and dealt with, eventually, okay, unlock the achievement of true knowledge of self, and then continued unblocking and continued clearing. And then now at times, well, you know, what's the difference? What am I going to do? So when I talk about the idea of, you know, Christianity using Paul or Saul of Tarsus, and that's to, in some way, bow down to something lower than myself. The church represents an authority that's a lesser authority than the supreme authority of what I am. So at a certain point, how can I pray, you know, in a certain type of way, in a certain phraseology, but it's equal? You see what I mean? Even that wouldn't that be a violation? It's like, well, wait a minute. Aren't you just, am I not just accessing what's already there inside of myself? Again, we can call it the resurrection of the risen Christ within me. You can call it that all day long. That's fine. But is that something that I must then prostrate myself before symbolically? Well, that's another violation. And again, here's antithesis covering its mouth and giggling and saying, can you look at the foolishness of even this one who, compared to the other bozos, is advanced. He's, you know, talking about this is the advanced course, and then, you know, and antithesis says, well, let's just wait 6 weeks and giggle at now it's problem solving at the level of, well, just don't bow down to something lower than yourself. Well, now he's going to bow down to something on his own level. And again, there is the version of Bruce Lee's fist that punches for itself, which is, you know, the idea of you know, and I've talked about the worshiper and the worshipee being contained in the same space. So in that moment, I recognized, okay, there's no reason for formalized prayer in this moment, because that process is happening, right, within myself. So it's really only after improper identification with the validity of this realm, which it doesn't have any validity, but it's to temporarily treat the realm as if it has validity. And then that's when the performance is representing a lower authority. And the way to get back to engaging with the I am, the what I am inside, is to then invoke the power of the Lord Christ Jesus. And the logic always has to be there. And here's the problem for the individual. They want all of this to exist where they can go tell other people about it, and other people will nod their head and understand and say, attaboy. And I have that, Benton has that same thing going on, but that's not possible. In fact, we'll be persecuted, we'll be treated like a weirdo. And again, to heal the large intestine is to accept being treated like a weirdo, is to accept persecution. So maybe when I recognized that I wasn't persecuted that much yesterday, and when I recognized that this morning, one of my earliest thoughts was, where's my persecution? And why am I even, you know, because I'm now at a level where I shouldn't expect persecution at all times. When I, on my own stream, talked about people basically Christians, why do people think that they're Christians but they're not being persecuted? That's an acknowledgement of their low level of progress. They're effectively zero level of progress. It would be a mistake for me to then apply that to myself, see, in the context of the performance. So actually, that's now we're getting into the Psalm 23, made to lie down in green pastures and lie beside the still waters. Because that was my experience this morning, was to lie in my car beside the still waters and to feel completely at peace and relaxed with almost not, and the only care on my mind was, where's my persecution? And then almost immediately recognizing, well, wait a minute, that's dead. See, that's for the grasshopper. That's for grasshopper, Benton. You're a grasshopper, dominical, ding dong dally, and a cane break, as my grandfather would have put it. See, and this system, the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, at the level of, again, to fail to reconcile the waking dream surrealistic notions of unreality is to then fall victim temporarily to, slightly lower states, right? And to then, which is fine, that's completely fine. It's to then what needs to be done to right the ship. And that at some point becomes a process that it does itself without me needing to concern myself with it or intervene. And I'm here to tell you, if you are what I am is the potential within each of you, and not Benton the performer, not Benton as an airsats cult leader. Each individual can tap into that, but it took Benton effectively his entire life in certain ways. But as far as really, really putting the nose to the grindstone, it's been over 15 years of doing this every single motherfucking day to get to this point. So as I speak these words, I understand that none of you are going to do it, and that's okay. I'm sort of the exception that proves the rule in that way, right? Now, part of healing the large intestine is to be completely fine with the reality that Benton should be free to sit around and to, just hang out and be provided, right? Staff, bring my lunch, but not in a overbearing, like I should be served way, because these discourses could be viewed as service, right? Even if the level of people's, what they do with the service, what they do with the resource is at the level of whatever my body's going to do with the sardines and the beans later and the hot sauce. See, it doesn't need to be some grand, great undertaking. In some way, that would be value for value. Oh, I'm preparing and delivering a discourse that's at least some people find to be, spiritually fulfilling on some level. They're getting something out of it. So why wouldn't I be able to, in my own, and see, this is where I get accused of arrogance, pride, and ego. Hey, you want to see a lack of humility in a performance of a humble person, just let me know that it's possible for me to be in an environment where, if upon request somebody will bring me my meal, and then you see how Benton can't even hardly bring himself to pretty please with sugar on top. If it's not too much trouble, could you bring me my food? Thank you. Right. There certainly wouldn't be a staff, where's my meal? As if they've already done something wrong because they didn't read my mind, which is your typical tyrannical authoritarian type. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a tyranny and an authoritarianism within me, and it's utilized now sometimes it spills over, but it's most often utilized to run roughshod and to rule myself with an iron fist. I am my own tyrant at that level. See? And, I think I went into a couple of different stores on stream, and if you hear how I talk to these people, and it's not to perform humility, that's really how I am, for better or for worse. Now you can argue, well, it's because he wants to get something out of it. He wants to be seen some type of way. Well, of course, don't we all? And then I would say I did a podcast in 2011. I did an entire podcast that thousands of people listened to, lest we forget. Actually, I think probably would have been well over 5,000 people in 2011 before there were streaming platforms. There was no such thing as a streaming there was streaming. Streaming audio had just come into being. And so part of those thousands of views was on Stitcher, and then part of it was on my own website. And if people streamed the audio, it was only because their internet connection was fast enough. There certainly wasn't, it wasn't really being streamed on phones yet back then. And I did an entire podcast episode about, is manipulation inherently bad? And this was Benton 15 years ago understanding some version of the Tao Te Ching without really even bothering to read it entirely. Yurt, if you're listening. And saying, well, you know, clearly manipulation would exist on a spectrum, and, you know, balanced or harmful, or, you know, you see the whole thing, right? However it manifests. And I'm sort of bastardizing my own analogy there, but, and it's not a perfect system. Meanwhile, there are no perfect systems. Yurt, there is no perfect system of the Book of Job. There is no perfect system of whatever Ted Kaczynski supposedly wrote, right? There are no perfect systems except within yourself, when properly identified, if you are what I am. If, and who knows? I have no way of knowing that. See? But again, the healing of the large intestine is to accept that, yeah, nobody's going to bring you your meals because they see how wondrous your fucking discourse is. Because Benton, if he was supported in living a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week spiritual life, and if other people were interested in having access to a resource of a being who could observe their own efforts, but just watching them and observing them and interacting with them over time, and that if they were their own death coach, and if they got to a sticking point and they said, I know, I'll go ask spiritual warrior Benton, and maybe he'll have an idea or two for me. And why is that not enough to earn my keep? Why is that not enough to have a shack to sleep in somewhere with an internet connection and a window unit and a run somebody's backyard? Because there's neighbors. That's why. And the neighbors are going to want to know what the fuck's going on back there. Because this idea of American freedom, and this idea that it's your property and you own it, no, you don't. Go try to stick a weirdo in the shed in the back and see. You'll see how quickly you're not free to do what you want on your own land. Because a month will go by and the neighbors are going to be calling the cops because our fearless fucking spiritual warrior genius has antisocial personality traits, not antisocial personality disorder. He has antisocial personality traits. So when the spiritual attacks of one, can't call him brother, Austin, heavily implied that Benton was behaving in psychopathic fashion in order to manipulate. Well, yeah, the manipulation is there. And then when that was extrapolated out to a potential extraction of resources, well, remember, it's America and we only measure in money. So resources can only mean money, right? And then that own person perhaps thinking, well, that person perhaps had given a series of donations and then at a certain point maybe felt some type of way like, oh, that Benton was using me to extract money, right? Well, is it possible that something else was being extracted, right? And that is at the level of manipulation. And in fact, the basis of nearly all human interaction is in fact manipulation. Are not both parties seeking something, right? And Benton just actively listening at times while wanting to speak, right? Benton had things on his mind, but then also understanding, oh, this is a grown-ass man who probably doesn't have a local, I'm guessing, I don't know, I can't know this, who probably has a local community where the masculine, manly side of society has been removed, such that, yeah, Benton happens to meet a standard of masculinity where when one actual grown-ass man needs to just be with another man and again, mind in the gutter, not in the way that this society would you know would talk about it, to actually hold space again for another man in the context of, I know as a man that don't nobody want to hear this shit, and I'm actually willing, capable, and kind of want to just be the person who's like, yeah, dump it on me, because guess what? The antisocial and certain traits, I'm not capable of picking up your baggage and taking it anywhere anyway. So it's just going to pass right on by. And some people need to have a human being actively listening to even get shit off their chest. See, they can't go out into the streets like Benton and deliver a performance and get it off their chest like I did recently, because I looked up in the sky while enjoying my morning in the grocery store at the seating area, and I look up and 4 military helicopters flying above Los Angeles in formation, the fucking feds, and I hate the feds. Meanwhile, I walk around here, half these people probably think I am the feds. Hell, maybe I am, and I just don't know it. Who knows? And I can't see now. It's the I am. I incorrectly used the I am. So now, some level of confess, repent, seek forgiveness. So that, strike that from the record. That was an inappropriate, that was a cursing of the blessing. See, to even utilize that form of I am. And that's some of the remaining artifice that was spoken about earlier. Some of the ruins of the artifice of Moloch's machine are still there. See, and so it's not a problem. It's not fear, guilt, and shame. It's the problem is to not recognize it or to continue it into the future. Get shed of it, as my people would say. So, I thought I was in my own desire for friendship in the physical, met some drunks, and they're affable. They're, California people, and, but then here they come walking their dogs, and now, it's already incompatible because they're walking dogs, but, early in 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 a.m. And then they pass by and I'm just giving it all to God, meaning just to the heavens. I'm delivering some discourse around it's, how I don't want to see these military helicopters. And then you can only imagine how Benton is going to start, rhetorically lambasting society for paying for all of this, right? And then, maybe they don't give a fuck. Maybe they're just like, yeah, we don't care. But, what's it going to be like next time I run into them? Who knows? Probably a budding friendship over. And again, that's fine. I accept that. But it's also a recognition that there's people who need to have somebody to talk to who will actively listen and won't give advice, or who will just maybe say, hey, well, maybe if you want to, you could think about this side of things. Not, well, if I was you, and oh, hell no, I wouldn't talk to me that way. All that fucking nonsense of the middle America people, all that, those low level fucking unevolved stuff, and I'll, seek to relate to it in some way. And yeah, maybe I will make it about myself on some level. Guess what? It's never not about Benton, because whoever you are listening, when is it ever not about you? Oh, you mean when you get into these codependencies? Because because now you're defining yourself in relation to, quote, the narcissist, right? And oh, you're the empath and they're the narcissist. Well, guess what? Same fucking thing. Now that's another Tao Te Ching fucking duality. Same fucking thing, asshole. It's the same form of energy, right? But back to the yurt stuff. Now I got to be accused of being a psychopath, and I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm listening to later that day. I'm listening to some psychiatrist, because this is just me. I like to listen to stuff like that. I'm listening to some psychiatrist use some true crime story to lecture. He's just lecturing. I'm listening to a lecture, effectively. And he mentioned something that reminds me, oh, that's right. Jealousy and envy is the driving force behind psychopathy. Well, guess who? Yeah, as a human, do I experience jealousy and envy? Of course I do, as do we all on some level. However, it's not the driving force that motivates my actions. And then I remember, wait a minute, it's not psychopathy. And I never believed I was a psychopath. I was willing, for the purposes of the conversation, I just accidentally, I forgot there was a microphone on my shirt. I just touched it. So that's what that sound was, if you heard anything. It was that, oh, wait a minute, Benton. No, you have antisocial personality traits, and not all of them. You don't have the disorder. This person was confused and doesn't recognize that, yeah, if you want to be friends with Benton, or you want to have Benton in your community and you're going to use Benton as a resource, well, he's going to use y'all for something. And it might just be, well, there's really not, there's nothing this person can really do for me other than send me money. And, you know, because of the constraints of their own schedule, certainly they have things to offer me. Here's the problem is if we're able to talk to each other for 2 hours uninterrupted for every other week, because that's their schedule, and I'm in some way fitting myself into that, and then that's not acknowledged, and I don't need it to be acknowledged. Who cares? But whatever they need is probably going to take precedence over whatever I might be able to get out of it. And I'm still going to be accused of, you know, of tiptoeing right up to the edge of psychopathy because a person has chosen to spend a lot of time developing patterns based on their own interactions with probably what could maybe be an actual psychopath, if not a psychopath, certainly a victim of NPD. And whether it's psychopathy or NPD, the driving emotional motivation is fear, jealousy, and envy, and primarily envy. And I'll tell a story. When I got to Seattle one summer, and I had this somebody gave me this really awesome Osprey hiking backpack. This thing would have cost $200 in a store in Santa Barbara. Somebody went to a store in Santa Barbara, California, and paid $225 for this. And then they went on some camping trips. And then that person was a Santa Barbara local, became homeless, had a storage, knew they weren't going to use it because the community provided them home resources as a homeless person. They weren't going to be homeless. And meanwhile, they had gotten overweight and it didn't fit them anyway. It barely fit me. But they gave it to me. And it was effectively brand new. Well, I got to Seattle. I thought to myself, well, I'm going to enjoy Seattle way more if I give somebody this backpack or I trade it, and then I'll carry a smaller backpack, right? So I found some dirty kids, some street kids, and I thought they might have some pot, and whatever tiny amount of pot they could come up with, I was going to trade it. Well, a lot of these groups, and this says something about the state of masculinity, a lot of these groups end up being the leader of the group is what they call a street mama, right? Because remember, a lot of these guys had no father and no mother. A lot of these people were just raised up without parents, and a lot of them in the foster care system. So, you know, and so I'm talking to this guy, and at a certain point, I'm trying to see, well, can you get some pot? Like, I'm basically like, what do you have to trade for this thing? Here comes Street Mama, and she immediately barks orders at this guy. And meanwhile, this pack was perfect for him, perfect size. He's carrying his bullshit around. His pack was fucked, right? It's just fucked. And he really could benefit from this. And Street Mama shows up, and here's her NPD and her psychopathy. She is jealous and envious because she's tiny and she can't wear the thing. And I still had enough muscle in spite of my lack of I'm not the broad guy with shoulders, but I was able to use it. There's no chance of her using this thing. She's tiny, right? She's a midget. She's damn near an actual midget. She's tiny. And so, and I didn't understand this at the time. So she's immediately jealous and envious that this guy's about to get something and she's not. And so the narcissist or the psychopath, if she was able to make use of it, she would get it for herself. But since that's not an option, she immediately devalues and dismisses it. So now that she's taken control of the interaction, at least as involves this other person, she just goes, fuck that pack. It's a piece of shit. And I'm just looking at it like, and I don't even say anything, but I'm like, this is a brand new fucking $200 backpack. Are you crazy? But then I, on some level, saw the game. And at that point, I'm like, well, fuck, I'm just going to give it to the guy. He's like, all right, man, just, whatever. I'm out of here. Take it. And I didn't want to be around here even one instant longer than necessary. Meanwhile, as a traveler in a subculture where they, based on the rules of their own game, they would have to accept me. I would have been free to just hang out with them for a day, a week, a month. But I would have had to accept her leadership, and that's never going to happen. And I certainly wasn't going to take over the group because I have no desire to do that either. And that bitch probably would have fucking stabbed me in my sleep or something. You can't underestimate anybody out here. Or you can, but But the point I'm making is that's what I was being accused of doing. I don't do that. I've never done that. Ever. I don't do that. I don't even understand that on some level. See? But so what was being referenced was the antisocial personality traits. Again, now we're in the context of the death coach. It's not really a problem if I have antisocial personality traits, as long as I know that I have antisocial personality traits. So just let's be clear. I want to define this based on the Wikipedia page. So give me a second while I try to figure out, pardon me, where my other phone is to look it up. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot I was charging my main phone, and I'm overcharging it because it's at 100%. So this is probably good. Yeah, it's not good to charge the phone for 2.5 hours. Either way, such is life. And that's my own seeking of effectiveness. It's like, hey, bozo. And, I don't mean bozo, but, how did you manage to forget? Yeah, but not disorder. See, you got to go antisocial, and you have antisocial personality disorder, and then you have antisocial behavior. See, we're going to behavior, not the disorder. And this is very important. Antisocial behaviors, sometimes called dissocial behaviors, are actions which are considered to violate the rights of or otherwise harm others by committing crime or nuisance. And remember, Benton, not a criminal. Such as stealing, Benton, not a thief, and physical attack, Benton is a pacifist who's not physically attacking people, or non-criminal behaviors such as lying, well, yeah, at times, especially in the past, and manipulation. Oh, yeah, probably all day, every day to some level, and don't even know I'm doing it much of the time. It is considered to be disruptive to others in society, and this is where I would say, well, can society teach them proper boundaries, please? Or is society, based on business transactions, is society choosing to foster individuals who don't know how to recognize and properly enforce boundaries and who don't even know when they're being manipulated? I would argue that that's the case. It is considered to be disruptive to others in society. And maybe that's what we're talking about here. And also, how is it my job for somebody else to set proper boundaries? It's not. Number two, that's also not an invitation for me to go prey upon the weak, right? My point is, will I check myself eventually? Sure, but why doesn't the other person have their own healthy boundaries? And if they don't have healthy boundaries, why are they refusing to install them? Well, now we get into the codependency side. Now we get into the empath side, see? And I'm not accusing anybody of that. I'm pointing out a thing that exists, whereby people choose not to improve when they could, as well as covert and overt hostility. Well, guess who's performed a shit ton of overt hostility and absolutely will do so to this day, and who will defend it and say, well, sometimes the only tool for a job is an asshole, such as when me and about 14 other people got stranded at the Greyhound station in Phoenix, Arizona, and our situation was only ever resolved because I took ownership of the situation and I was hostile to the people who worked there. And eventually I found the person who was in charge of the facility who told me that it wasn't his job to fix our situation. And I said, well, if you're in charge, it has to be your responsibility. Number one. I said, number two, why am I doing your job? And then if that's not overtly hostile, I don't know what is. See, this idea that overt hostility is somehow wrong. Well, what was it when Christ supposedly took a cat of nine tails and drove the money changers out of the temple? Wasn't that hostile? Right? Antisocial behavior also develops through social interaction within the family and community. That's probably where I got mine, was the family, I'm assuming. It continuously affects a child's temperament. There you go. Cognitive ability. Interesting. Maybe is that part of the reason Benton can't visualize or has an extremely limited ability to visualize, perhaps? And their involvement with, I'm a victim of this on some level, and their involvement with negative peers, dramatically affecting children's cooperative problem-solving skills. Interesting. Many people also label behavior which is deemed contrary to prevailing norms for social conduct as antisocial behavior, which it's not. It's merely a person who chooses not to conform or can't conform. That's not antisocial. And in fact, I've seen examples where previous societies, not necessarily in America, showed that they were willing to accept members of their own community and family in spite of individuals' refusal or inability to conform to society, such as my famous example of looking at a coffee table book of like uh, um, pictures of living rooms over time. And I found one from like the 1800s where there was a main fireplace and hearth, and then there was a smaller fireplace and hearth on a different wall. And it explained that the smaller fireplace, now maybe they just made this up, I don't know, but the smaller fireplace was there because there was a member of the family that refused to have anything to do whatsoever with the rest of the family. And the family still loved them and tolerated them and treated them appropriately, so much so that the person would rather freeze to death, in a northeastern winter or whatever, wherever this was. They would rather be cold in the corner than to interact with the family huddled around the fireplace, so that eventually the family's like, fuck it, when summer rolls around or when the weather's good, we're going to build this motherfucker his own fireplace or her own fireplace. That's love, by the way. Because love doesn't know anything of conditions. Love doesn't know, hey, man, we can't love you unless you come over here and huddle around this fire with us and prove that you'll conform to what we expect of you. That can't ever be love. And that's why this world doesn't know what love is, right? And that was the human spirit. That was the spirit of what I am within those people. See, and it wasn't Benton. I just mean that was the same thing within them, saying, fuck it, we're just building a fireplace. Because clearly these people are not going to ever get with the program and hang out with us. And and again, on some level, I would respect it. Just like these California chicks. As soon as they hear my accent, they're out. Good, I respect it. Why should they want to have anything to do with the person that sounds like me? I wouldn't either if I was from here. Fuck. The worst. However, researchers have stated that it is a difficult term to define, particularly in the United Kingdom, where many acts fall into this category. Yeah, this very performative thing at a social level. The term is especially used in Irish English and British English. Although the term is fairly new in the common lexicon, the word antisocial behavior has been used for many years in the psychosocial world, where it was defined as, quote, unwanted behavior. See, when we talk about unwanted behavior, we're already into preferences. And my thing is, here's my own antisocial personality behavior. Yeah, man, that's your preference. I have my own preferences. They're only really important to us individually. I understand that there may be more people that share the preference of not wanting to deal with my behavior. Well, guess what? I'm as good or as bad as the rest of you. I have to deal with y'all, and y'all got to deal with me. And if you don't like it, not my problem. And again, now we're back to the overt hostility. See? Now, society, through Moloch's machine and through the public indoctrination and through seeking a corporate structure to have good little addressable corporate units that businesses can make a more effective use of within the context of the vacuous, illusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, who benefits from cajoling and coercing and trying to get Benton to express as anything one iota below what he's supposed to express as? Fuck you, or fuck that, fuck them. It's bullshit. So I'm actually proud of some of my so-called antisocial personality traits. Unwanted behavior as a result of personality disorder. Well, I don't have the disorder. I have what would be known as a defective personality, meaning even if I try really hard, even if I death coach myself up, I still can't fully get there, because I can't tell when I'm about to do some shit and it's going to rub people the wrong way, and the needle on the record's going to go and scratch. And everybody's going to look at me like, hey, bozo, what the fuck's wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't know. And it's the same reason why people are like, hey, have you ever tried an open mic? Maybe you could be a comedian. I'm like, yeah, I kill it. I definitely kill in public. The problem is I have no way of knowing that what I'm about to say is going to cause groups of strangers to simultaneously burst into laughter. I I lack the mechanism to know that it's about to happen. Therefore, yeah, there's really no point. Could I go on stage and rant and rave? Sure. I have no way of knowing ahead of time if it's going to be funny. For example, David, that's called having a defective personality, and it's okay. For example, David Farrington, a British criminologist and forensic psychologist, stated that teenagers can exhibit antisocial behavior by engaging in various amounts of wrongdoing, such as stealing, vandalism, sexual promiscuity, excessive smoking, heavy drinking, confrontations with parents, and gambling. So, of those, I had, as a young person, stealing, vandalism, sexual promiscuity, did not smoke, did not drink, confrontations with parents, although it tended to be a little more passive aggressive in my case. It wasn't really confrontations. Actually, it was more them confronting me, actually, and gambling. I didn't gamble as a young person. That came later. In children, conduct disorders could, and I actually had no problem. I was able to control myself, the high level of discipline. The conduct really wasn't a problem. It's that I was good at doing bad conduct when nobody was around. The authorities weren't there to bust me effectively. And I was really good at getting away with shit. But I'm talking as a child. This hasn't necessarily crossed over. But here we get into what antisocial behavior is typically associated with other behavioral and developmental issues such as hyperactivity, not me necessarily. Depression, yes, although it took a form that would not have been recognized as lethargy or sadness. Learning disabilities, not really, but kind of, sort of, in a way, but not really. And impulsivity, certainly impulsivity, but also again able to sit in the class and get through school, right, without being disruptive. So, but all of that would have been going on inside of me to some, not all of it, but some of that was going on inside of me to some extent alongside these issues. But then what can be alchemized, right? It is the ability of the individual to alchemize some of these things and to bring forth, to turn a negative into a positive is also a thing. Alongside these issues, one could be predisposed or more inclined. So, and this is, I'll just go ahead and cut it off there and say this was what I was saying to Yurt when I was on stream and he was typing into the chat. I said, how is it possible that I'm guilty of this thing that you're accusing me of and there's no proof? There's no history of mental illness. There's no being medicated and there's no criminal record. Like, how is the performance of the being able to divert and divulge, or to divert away from the people who actually perform or function psychopathically or narcissistically or antisocially in the way that they're doing so much harm that society needs to intervene? And then I would further assert, if Benton can be identified at the level of possibly harming other people, that doesn't absolve everybody else of their own harm that they may be doing. The fact that everybody else is grouping up and more or less behaving the same doesn't then convey upon or confer onto the group, well, they're not harming anybody. Bullshit. And then that becomes a gaslighting where, well, Benton is doing harm and nobody else is. Fuck you. Again, Benton is now starting to identify a little too closely with the realm, and that's how strong this delusion is. And now Benton must ask himself, do I feel better or worse than when I started the stream? See, now some of this is the egg drink containing compounds that put the physicality of the being into a space of receiving more healing. So in fact, now that I'm feeling some type of way in my tissues and it ain't comfortable, that's actually the same reason that I woke up this morning and felt the tissues felt great. I had almost no pain anywhere in the body. The mood was calm, the mind was calm, and now it's quite the opposite in certain ways. And then again, the only way out is through that turbulence. And I would say, is the being supposed to be calm, chilled, and placid all the time? I would say it's a bad sign if the being is not going through a turbulence, because this realm is very upsetting and turbulent. And so for my internal space to remain calm and placid all of the time, many individuals will think that they're doing that, but they're doing it through repression. And as Benton noted long ago, 4 years ago, I started referring to the so-called truth community, especially in the live chat, and saying, oh, well, that's right, y'all are a bunch of Zen Buddhists. Sure, you're not, right? It's pharmacological. It's people taking pills, it's head meds, psych meds, and it's also people repressing. Well, I refuse to repress anymore. I've taught myself not to repress, and then Benton is still unlocking and releasing some of the repression from many, many decades ago. And so what Benton is now experiencing on stream is based upon a process of healing, but the healing feels like something negative. Again, the only way out is through. Same thing with, I felt completely fine this morning with my bowels, and then TMI, I know, but then right after the proper turd, the turd having been properly formed, was deposited into the toilet bowl, and looking at it and saying, wow, that's a proper turd. And then immediately going into detox symptoms, immediately saying, wow, my body's calling out for water, even though I'd already drank over a liter of water by that time this morning. And in fact, I'm reminding myself to have more water. And it's not to sip on water all day. It's at certain times the body needs more, other times it doesn't need any. And to know the difference. And meanwhile, my research indicates that a lot of people are so dehydrated, their body doesn't even bother to send signals of thirst anymore, because it's like, well, what's the point? He's not going to drink water. He or she's not going to drink water anyway. So why send them a thirst signal that's going to go unquenched, right? So now I'm doing some yoga, an informal yoga session to deal with whatever energy. So what happens is the emotional state, when I go off into one of those tirades or diatribes, now whatever stagnated within the energy sphere says, okay, well, now we can get up out of here, because now he's willing to engage with those energetic states, a lot of which would have to do with anger and resentment, clearly, because Benton was a very, very angry person for a long ass time. And so there's still some of that there. But now Benton is not an angry person, generally speaking, on a day in, day out basis. So it limits how much of the anger can be experienced and cleared, if that makes sense. And then Moloch's machine certainly has entrained us to sort of have a reason to be angry, right? You know, imagine just being angry for no fucking reason. Well, I have days like that sometimes where it's just, I recognize, oh, I'm fucking pissed off, and it's not even connected to any, it's just anger, right? And it's not like oh, I'm so mad, I could, it's just, oh, that's what that is down there. It's like this just base level anger at times, and it doesn't feel good. Whereas the more powerful, strong anger it can be used as a very effective fuel in some ways at times, but then to entertain that too frequently, that becomes the candle burned at both ends, or the battering ram. And the thing about being a battering ram is the battering ram is also being battered just as much as the thing that's being battered by the battering ram, if that makes sense. But at a certain point, I recognize, oh, I'm actually like a battering ram, and I'm also being battered as I just bang, 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 bang against something in my own anger, right? To, no effect. Well, not all the time, but, to no effect. And so the point of all of this is Death Coach. On paper, I like Death Coach 42, but Death Coach 5000 has a ring to it, but almost sounds like the Veggie-Matic or whatever. So maybe just Death Coach. But now what would 42 represent? Well, 4 is the letter D, and 2 is the letter B. Do better. Do better. And that's really that's the entire practice is, whatever the level is right now, do better. 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 And to perform that every single day for many, many years adds up to a great amount of progress. But the system, Moloch's machine, has installed its own artifice within the being to say, well, no, wait a minute. The artifice says, what are you talking about? Everything you do is perfect and righteous and above reproach, because that's how we market to you. That's how we use advertising to get you to buy specific products and services. And the system is dependent upon you, quote, earning a living within this world of death and game of lies. And in order to worship the God of consumerism and to be accepted and to uphold the status quo and the social contracts and to be accepted within your peer groups, you got to put out a certain particular graven image before Moloch. And a lot of that has to do with earning enough money to be able to participate in society. So when I talk to my mother about the financial system and all of these things and the economy, which I don't think I mentioned, I think she brought up the economy, but then she starts panicking when I point out that, well, if the standard is being able to feed oneself and sleep indoors, that's fairly easily achieved. And then she went into a panic because now she's not willing to face the consumerism that lives within her and her own mind control. So now it's got to be, some level of not a reconciliation, because reconciliation within her would solve the problem. It's to then, well, there's got to be some sort of a rationale for all of this, right? It's got to be, it's got to be signed off on. Authority has to say, well, it's okay. But the reality is, this idea of go out there, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and earn a so-called living, it's really not so that you're not a burden on society. It's because it's not that difficult to feed, clothe, and shelter oneself, even in America with the so-called inflation. It's that society has gotten to the point where it's in the process of where it's going to profit off of every moment of your life, see, in the very near future. And that is the you will own nothing and you will be happy. Because in order for corporations to figure out how to turn a profit for every single now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone of your life, it's going to be subscription services. It's going to be self-driving cars, and you don't own the car, it's a subscription service. And you're going to be happy to not own a car because you're going to get driven across town or across the city, and you're going to get to look at your phone the entire time. You're not going to have to pretend to give a fuck about safety while you drive across town. In a group of cars who are also people just want to look at their phones, so they've grouped up and they're flying in formation. And Benton just wants to cross the street, and he can't because people are looking at their phones. And then they see Benton walking. They're looking at their phone. They look up, oh, there's Benton walking. And then they look back at their phone. Well, Benton knows that they're there. The last thing he's about to do is walk in front of their car. So they've already timed it out in their mind. Well, okay, when they get to the stop sign, that'll be about the time that the pedestrian gets there. And then I'm going to have 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi to look at my phone. Then I'm going to look up and drive away. And well, Benton has already stopped on the sidewalk and is just watching all of this happen. And now he's like, hey, look at those people. They're just sitting at that stoplight they're sitting at that stop sign looking at their phone because they think I'm going to be in front of their car by now. They think I'm about to be to the other side of the sidewalk. And now they look up and they're confused. Hey, where'd that guy go? Oh, he's over there just looking at us. How strange. What's wrong with him? And then they continue on about their day. Whereas if they were paying attention, they might say, okay, I can slightly speed up a little bit. And now I see that he's slowed down a couple of paces. And in fact, he's making time and space where we're going to be able to get through here. And then he doesn't want to go in front of us anyway. So he's going to time it to where he's going to be able to go right behind us. But that's not possible because society refuses to do what's right individually. And society would rather be happy and look at their phone than own the automobile. So when the time comes that it's a Waymo subscription service and the person doesn't own an automobile because it's not even financially possible in the very near future, most likely, they're going to be happy. And why don't people know that this is what it means to you will own nothing and you will be happy? Again, this is why society and the so-called truth community could decide to have an environment where we could have a Benton somewhere who's happy to figure all of this out and tell us about it and can be used as a resource. But he's not going to go out and earn the Federal Reserve notes to buy his own food on some level and to pay for his own apartment. And if he does all of that, unless he does it while he's driving a truck, he's not going to be around for us to ask him, well, what do you think about this and what do you think about that? Meanwhile, you know who asked me what I think about things? Nobody. Nobody ever drops me an email and says, hey, man, well, I've been working on this in my own life, and I see that you've already progressed farther along that same way. So I'm wondering, did you ever run into this? Because how do you think Benton grew to this level? Part of Benton growing to this level is my entire life, the moment I see somebody that I can tell knows something, and the moment that I see, oh, well, they're better at this thing and I want to be better at it, I start asking them specific questions that I've tailored. But nowadays, consumption and the consumer society and marketing and advertising has devolved to the level where a person can't seek me out as a resource on that level because they can't acknowledge a superiority, because if they acknowledge a superiority, they can't feel the way that advertising and Moloch's machine needs them to feel inside of themselves. So it's more important, they're proving with their own actions that it's more important to consume and to be useful to Moloch's machine that they were sacrificed to than to be useful and effective in the in internally bootstrapping and growing and changing and evolving mind, body, and spirit within themselves, which I would argue would possibly at some point be more beneficial to society. It would be way better for them, although in the short term it's going to be worse for them because they're not going to fit in with the people around them anymore. And what I would say is fitting around with the people around you in this world is probably a really bad sign, honestly. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. Oh, but keep lying to yourself and say, not where I live, Benton. Everything's fucking hunky-dory. We all get along and we laugh and cajole and we support each other and we help each other. Oh, really? Then why is it that I know with 100% certainty that if I come to where you live, it's going to be off the chart social problems, it's going to be off the chart drug use, whether legal or illegal, it's going to be obesity, it's going to be people on psych meds, and it's going to be just problem after problem. It's going to be people divorced. It's going to be children raised without a father and a mother in the home. How come that's what I'm going to see? But y'all have fucking you've let this thing lull you into a false sense of security that, well, yeah, the world's fucked, but everything's fine where I live. Oh, really? Well, if things are so great and everybody's so happy, why are people on anti-anxieties where you live? Why are people on antidepressants where you live? Huh? Why is it basically normal for a grown-ass man to go get on the scripts? You know, it wasn't that long ago that it was really it was more of a lady thing, right? What happened there? Can you tell me that? Meanwhile, now we've crossed over into, I'm actually starting to do myself a disservice with this level of discourse. But it's good for the tissues. I'm now doing some quite painful stretching of my right shoulder, and I already stretched out on my pull-up bar this morning. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. And you know, how much of this is in your tissues? You know, as much as everybody wants to think they're a Zen Buddhist and they're loosey goosey, you know, they're loosey goosey chat lords and edge lords in the chat. But I don't know, if you went and got you a deep tissue Swedish massage, you'd probably be sore for a month, right? Because you're probably not even in touch with whatever the fuck's going on. Meanwhile, years ago, I was digging in my whatever I could reach, digging into my tissues so much. I was like, basically, it's like, damn, I'm a grown ass man. I probably have whatever people think fibromyalgia is. I had so many trigger points in my flesh, and now most of them are gone. But there's something happening in my shoulder, so I'm doing some. So what that is as you heard the energy level, if you heard the energy of the discourse shift, it was that part of these egg drinks and the cayenne and the Ceylon cinnamon and the ginger root extract and all of this, it serves to sort of, you know, remove some of that inflammation. And again, the emotional energetic side of it is the only way out is through. The only way through it is to experience the emotions that were originally repressed. And that's what I'm doing now. And I must do it while maintaining my own range of motion, because what the shoulder and the upper back wants to do is it wants to protect itself in these moments by limiting the range of motion. So now Benton is forcing it and not permitting it to limit the range of motion. And it's in fact using it to do some stretching. Like now, I didn't realize that my deltoid, some of my right deltoid is always tight, but it's even tighter than normal. See? And that's the body is seeking, it's protecting itself in a way. Well, that's okay. And so observing the amount of pain in my body after day, year after year, coming up on decade after decade of working with all of this, I can only imagine what it's like for you folks. And that's my basis for compassion. Let's see. Shout out to the chat, 17 likes. Thank you, Christos. That's right, Christos. Christos says, don't let the fire burn you out. Exactly. What is being burned must also withstand being consumed. So that fire that's burning is also being consumed. You know, the individual that's the source of the fire, it's also being consumed. So that's a very key point, sir. So thank you for adding to thank you for contributing to the conversation in that way. He says, AKA your flame of power can cost you if not finessed exactly and directed accordingly. 100%, sir. And so this is where, again, I hate that it's always Christos when I bring this up. I don't hate it, but it's unfortunate perhaps. But this is where boomers are just simply unwilling to acknowledge that, you know, these younger generations know a thing or two. But then what were boomers indoctrinated? So boomers don't understand that what served society economically was to have a system where go to work for one corporation or one business, serve them your whole life, and then it's the value of experience. So when a person is new on that job, then of course the person who's been there 20 years is respected. And then that spilled over into all of society where it just became, the connotation of age with wisdom. Where what we have now is the boomers are mostly a bunch of old fools, right? Not entirely, but mostly a bunch of old fools. And then it works in the opposite direction where it's then implied that, well, the younger folks are wet behind the ears. And I'm like, I don't know. Have you talked to them? Have you read their YouTube comments? Have you listened to their videos? They're way ahead of y'all. And I don't mean you, the listener. They're way ahead of boomers in a lot of ways, right? And again, to say, Gen Z doesn't want to work, I don't know. Have you ever threatened them with a 40-hour work week that would allow them to have a car, an apartment, and eat food? Because Gen Z's never been threatened with a low-level, entry-level position where they can work 40 hours, pay their rent, drive their car, and eat food. Oh, look at them in mommy and daddy's basement. Well, I don't know. Do you want mommy and daddy to kick them out to the streets? Because 40 hours only pays for an apartment. How are they going to eat? How are they going to get to work? Meanwhile, what serves Moloch's machine and business and corporations is, well, no, now it's a gig. Now Gen Z, it's however many jobs you can get. Meanwhile, corporations say they won't even give you a full-time job because they don't want to pay benefits. So it's 28 to 32 hours a week. And good luck finding two compatible $28 to $32 a week jobs, because pretty much all these low-level corporate jobs demand full availability, right? And then, use the gig apps. You know, boomers never dealt with that. When I was when I was in my 20s, all I had to do was let somebody employ me for 40 hours a week and then not waste too much of my money. Now, did the money go that far? No, it didn't. But if I had the lowest levels of financial discipline, I could pay my rent. I could pay with a roommate. I could pay all the bills with a roommate, and I could put gas in my car. I did not have a car payment. If I had a car payment, it's probably already not doable back then. If I'd had a car payment, and then I could eat food and have a little bit left for entertainment, right? And people want to romanticize the past. Meanwhile, again, this idea that the 50s was great. Okay, until somebody decides they want to get a tattoo. Well, that's not allowed. until somebody decides, well, a girl says, well, you know, maybe I would like to see what I look like in a pair of pants. Maybe I would like some of these fellas to get a, you know, a look at my backside. Well, that's not allowed. Oh, well, you know, maybe, you know, a particular woman would say, well, you know, maybe I do want to sort of just, you know, not live this traditional life. Oh, well, slut shaming, right? Oh, well, you know, can't do that, can't be accepted in society and behave that way. So what am I describing? Puritanical, repressive culture. So do boomers really think that people who have smartphones and have completely given themselves over to the corporate Borg hellscape are somehow going to recreate 1962? Are you crazy? Meanwhile, do you even know what was happening in society in 1962? What was happening was urban decay, urban renewal. Oh, well, that was those Democrat cities. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I could go study the history of wherever the fuck you're from. And there was all kind of crazy shit going on in 1962. Oh, wasn't that much longer till, you know, Martin Luther King and you know, the whole civil rights movement. But see how conveniently all the problems are forgotten, right? And just, oh, let's romanticize the good parts. Well, you can't separate the bad from the good on that level. See? And I accept all of this so that my large intestine can heal enough that I can poop properly. And that's the practice for Benton, is to be able to move through all of this, to talk with you folks about it without, and still have a large intestine that's going to continue this healing process, so I can make a turd. All right. And also do it without my upper back and upper shoulder limiting my range of motion as it's seeking to do. So now we're doing all kind of crazy gyrations in the car. That's that good pain. Woo-wee! That is amazing. And that pain where I'm stretching right now, didn't even know it was there this morning, but it was. See, that's the thing, is when I talk about I woke up and experienced no pain, oh, it was there. It was there. It just wasn't detectable in that whatever energetic form I was in at the time. See? Oh, it's there, buddy. Man. But remember, there's always pills so the person can feel some type of way, right? There's always pills so the person can feel some type of way. I'm about to take this ginseng extract so I can feel some type of way. How about that? And then I'm going to use the bathroom. I'm going to pee in a jug, and then I'm going to probably make more eggs. And if the battery holds out, then I guess y'all are welcome to ride along with my blatherings, if that's in the cards for anybody. If that's the sort of thing folks are into. And if the discourse is not advancing, if the efforts and collaborations of the so-called community are not advancing, what's the point? What's the point, Christos? And I ask you rhetorically. I don't, there's, you know, just, you know, what's the point? You know, Christos probably ain't hanging out, staying the same as he was I don't even really know, honestly don't know Christos. Not that I ever knew him in the first place, but, you know, I don't know what he's been up to. I assume he's a different person on some level than before. I'm assuming. Can't know that. But either way, might not even be listening anymore. Yeah, hustlers and players got to stay hydrated. Yeah, good morning to you as well, Christos, if you're listening. And you know, I pop into Modern Men Lose Again every once in a while, but as soon as I hear Snafu's voice, I got to turn it off. I can only take maybe not very much Bex, and there's somebody else that I won't listen to. Oh, that Cage, I won't listen to him. There's another one I can't remember, but it's not to say there's anything wrong with them. It's to say, if you think you're going to foster an environment and there's going to be a Benton around, well, not while these people are allowed to hang out and never grow and change and evolve and And that's, I accept that they're not going to grow and change and evolve. They're probably not able to, but the so-called community finds it more expedient and appropriate to make sure that a space is prepared for them. But what's it going to demand of Benton? Oh, well, we're happy to have you, Benton, but we're going to need you to modify your behavior. And is that not some acknowledgement that Benton seemingly has abilities and talents and discipline where he probably could uh, improve his behavior? Guess what? Yes, I can, and I do that anyway. So if the current level of behavior is not deemed as acceptable, well, wouldn't the answer just be to accept it? Right? Oh, but he's got this certain vocal tone, and oh, he's very forceful at times, and you know, he only wants to interact under certain circumstances. You're damn right, because I'm some version of the fella who would not have anything to do with the rest of the family, and they just got tired of watching me shiver the whole night through and built me my own fucking fireplace so I didn't have to be cold in the winter. Right. Oh, but remember, everybody's guilty until proven innocent. So how dare you, sir? How dare you, um, be this way? So what do you mean? This is how I am. You think I can control that? Meanwhile, I've done and continue to do everything in my power to work through all of these things. What the fuck is Cage or Snafu doing to work through their own issues? Now, maybe Cage is. I don't know. He's a bad example, actually. But, is Snafu growing and evolving and changing and moving through? Is Jack Talcott doing any version of that? Right? Any of these people? But space is always provided for them, is it not? Within the community? And is that not a mechanism where everybody everybody has a support group where nobody's going to be confused about lack of progress? And if you got Benton around making progress and showing progress, well, that's a mirror held up to everybody else to remind them, well, wait a minute, it's 4 years later. We haven't even, unless we went to his channel, we've seen hide nor hair, as my people would say, of old Benton. And now here he is. And, possibly if a person is able to look at me properly, they'll see, oh, yeah, he has grown and evolved and changed. Some of which is, I'm not going to have anything to do with most of what I see happening. And that's growth, because clearly in the past, I was willing to have a great deal to do with what was going on 4 years ago. If what's going on now is effectively what was going on 4 years ago, the fact that I will refuse to have anything whatsoever to do with most of it, that is growth and change. All right, just a moment. And thank y'all for the likes. If anybody has spare money, I need money like everybody else does. And certainly nobody here is obligated to give me money. And Benton doesn't want to become directly aggressive and say, give me money, give me money, give me money. And I'm sure to this day when I'm brought up, that's the first thing Snafu says, which is fine, whatever. But if anybody knows, some people don't know who this is. These are certain people in a very, very, very tiny niche part of YouTube, and that's okay. But in the sense of get busy living or get busy dying, and which isn't even the proper context, since I'm, the death coach, right, or a death coach, and then death coach working on as a perverse or inverted version of life coach, which is actually, I would argue, a perverted version of a death coach. But then the idea of this experience as to travel through the valley of the shadow of death in a coach, like an old-timey Western coach, pulled along, right? So that it's a parable. It's already a parable. And they say, well, what does it mean? I don't know. You tell me what it means. Isn't that what Kurt Cobain said about his lyrics? Well, why would I know what they mean? How about you figure it out, and then we'll both know? And I hate that expression, but reminded me of, I watched a lot of Sarah Boone content. And, with all of this proper identification, I can't even watch half the stuff I like to watch anymore. Anyway, I'm getting too cranky. Oh, apologies for the crankiness. That's inappropriate crankiness. I want money and I want it now. That's right. J.G. Wentworth. Did you see that these people who thought they had won money from Publishers Clearinghouse, but it was a series of structured payments? Well, J.G. Wentworth is proving its value because Publishers Clearinghouse announced that those people are simply not going to continue to receive their payments because it turns out that magazines are no longer really a thing. And that's how Publishers Clearinghouse was making the money to give to the prize winners. And in fact, if anybody's ever heard of this gangster Whitey Bulger, and movies have been made of him and all of this, what he actually went to prison for was he was doing J.G. Wentworth, but he wasn't doing it with a license. He was doing it illegally, so-called, and that's what he went to prison for. Was he had enough money that he did his own version of, he was buying people's structured payments, and that's what they convicted him of under, I think probably under RICO. Not exactly sure, but I never looked into it too closely. Sounds right though. How's this? I've spent, and as far as the donos, I mean, yes, some of it I just every once in a while I treat myself to some slices of pizza, and God forbid, maybe a Guinness Extra Stout or two, but as we saw on my IRL streams. But I also paid like $16 for these Bluetooth, these lavalier microphones. So if anybody feels like donating, I mean, again, I'll be okay either way. And it is sort of a way to kind of, even if it's a token gesture. I have people now that'll just send me, and they'll put in they'll type into the comments or whatever on the donation. They'll say, token gesture. Hey, that feels good too. Doesn't have to be. And if I go to the grocery store, I might want to have I'm off the coffee, but I might want to have me a yerba mate. They got really good yerba mate over there, and I might want to have me one. Who knows? That's $2.50. A couple of token donos come in, and might pay for my dark chocolate and in my yerba mate. Right? I'm easy to please. And this is what we talk about in a proper society. It's never equal between men and women, because a woman makes a man's life harder, and a man, if he's actually a man and performing as a man, makes a woman's life easier. See, it's some version of that, right? Is it okay to sort of make each other's lives easier in a way, or do we need to make each other's lives harder at every turn? And that seems to be what society performs nowadays. It's like, the performance of making each other's lives more difficult in certain ways. Anyway, hang on. I got to open this door. Or I'm going to. Get a little light. Take advantage of a little bit of light there. Can y'all see me? How? There he is. There he is. Yeah, I want my money and I want it now. That was J.G. Wentworth. Yep. Yeah, no, it's my money and I want it now. That's what it was. It's my money and I want it now. Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it is. Yes, I got more bounce than the fucking bump. And if you want to know why, because I motherfucking truck it. Never really knew what those Beastie Boys lyrics were, but I've heard that Check Your Head at least 1,000. I've heard that whole album at least 1,000 times, probably more. Good album, but it's dated. It doesn't really hold up. But if anybody remembers Beastie Boys, Check Your Head. Check your head, partner. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. All right. Can we crack some eggs and not waste any yolks this time? Pretty pleased with sugar on top. And I was just reminded of some of the lyrics talking about Eddie Haskell from the Leave It to Beaver, and he was, you know, his behavior certainly was not what other people would have preferred of him. Why was that okay back then for him to, you know, kind of not quite go along with the program? And nowadays, it's like conformity is the new non-conformity, meaning as long as the behavior is very specific, then people are kind of free to make their own choices and live a certain type of life, right? I think EBT called it licentious liberty, which I really like. It's almost like, well, society's become evil and people are serving filth and depravity and wickedness. So, be decadent and depraved all you want, but we're going to need very specific behaviors, right? So that everybody can sort of, they want to enjoy their, whatever, uh, whatever tranquility inducing meds they're on. Like, hey, we're going to, they want to reasonably be able to know what to expect. Otherwise, their meds might, it might not be the proper cocktail of meds if they don't run into the expected behaviors. If they run into some person like me who I don't know what they behave, I have no ability to understand what is expected of me in many situations. I simply, if a person has an expectation, I don't know what I can't ever know what that expectation is unless there's a formal structure. Like I go in the store and, I go up there and the cashier greets me, or, there's that whole, how are you today? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. If it's formal, I'm very good at that. But once it's just, once it becomes this informal muddying of the waters, I'm just lost, you know. But then now it's this idea. In the past, that seemed okay. The Eddie Haskell type stuff, just oddball weirdo to some extent. But then now, with the chemicals people are on and the stresses they're under, I don't think they can even process it anymore. And I'm here to tell you, where I'm at right now is way more, well, it's way less intolerant, or it's way more tolerant than the middle part of the country. And the Northeast is kind of its own thing. That's a whole nother thing. So I'm not implying that the East Coast is any better, really, but it's that middle part where people seem to be the most lost, in my experience. Now, morally, certainly, with the accepting the moral depravity, whereas the middle part of the country is more inclined, especially in the Northeast too, of course. The middle part of the country is more inclined to, it's repressive. So the moral depravity is there, but it's repressed. And that's where you get into situations where people will use the Christianity while being like the worst people you could ever imagine. And I've seen some pretty famous true crime stuff where, just horrific crimes have been committed, and then you see the people being interrogated, and it's all like wrapped up in the church, and God blessing them with a business and all of this. Meanwhile, like the pastor. All right, we're back. Cool. I got to install this little clip, though. All right. We're back. And where'd the other phone go? Disorganized. Get with the program, sir. program, sir. Uh-oh. Where's the phone? Well, it's got to be here somewhere if I'm still online. Since I'm hot spotted. Fuck it. See, I have this part of my brain that it just can't give up. It just can't. It has to complete the mission. This is one of the most annoying things about living in a car is just everything's lost at a certain point. Multiple times a day. I don't know. I don't know where it is. The hell? This doesn't make any sense. Aha! Yep. It's like everything in here is the same color. Brilliant. Everything will be the same color and you will be happy. Oh. And man, I hope this Charlie Kirk stuff gets memory hold pretty quick. Although maybe it won't. But I was over it the whole time. But I don't even know what to say at this point. Charlie Kirk. Ridiculous. Oh, I want to start up the. I know there's not enough light in here. But fire up the stove, sir. Coming up on 3 hours, man. Where's the battery? Oh, we're dying. Battery's dying. All right. 4% battery. This is not good. Bye.